keep in mind, I mean, when we talk about refinancing, debt or leverage, whatever term you want to use, is one of the most dangerous things in the world. You over leverage and you can end up, like a lot of people will tell you after 2008, destitute. But at the same time, the intelligent and smart use of debt or leverage is probably one of the most powerful financial concepts in the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Fixated on Real Estate's Experts Live. I am your host, Tarl Yarber, and we will also be joined with our perpetual guest, Jay Scott, who is also the host of Bigger Pockets Business Podcast. Today's topic is a hot one. Today's topic is something that's on the mind of a lot of landlords out there, a lot of real estate investors buying and holding for the long term. The question is, do we hold on to our properties today, or do we fold them and cash our chips in? The question is because of all the economic turmoil that is going on out there in the world, the political turmoil as well, and certain markets, certain specific markets in the US are actually being highly affected in their rental market, whether it's most of these are major cities. And is it affecting you? And if you're in one of those major cities, what should you be doing? And where should you be possibly putting your money? So it's going to be a big topic, and we're very excited to have our guest today. We have Enrique Jevons with Jevons Property Management, which you guys are going to love him. And of course, Jennifer Beadles, one of my favorite people. She is joining us. She's invested in multiple states. You'll learn more about her in a moment. And that said, today's topic, we're going over so many things, including like the strategic strategies. If you decide to sell your property, how should you be doing it? The cost that actually is associated with it. And should you just put your money in the bank, or should you be putting it somewhere else? We're also talking about the markets that you could possibly be investing in. And if you're going to choose a different market to invest in, what key indicators should you be looking for? We're talking about long-term growth. We're talking about inflation. We're talking about debt. We're talking about so many factors, including evictions, the moratoriums with forbearances, which is always a hot topic, how that's going to affect 2021, and who is going to benefit the most in 2021. And is that going to be you? Because there's a specific type of real estate investor that's probably going to benefit the most coming in 2021. And we're going to find out more about that in today's episode. So I hope you guys enjoy it, and we'll see you in a second. Welcome to Fixated on Real Estate Experts Live. I am your host, Mr. Tarl Yarber, with my perpetual guest, Mr. Jay Scott, who contractually obligated cannot be the co-host because he is the host of the Bigger Pockets Business Podcast. So make sure you guys check that out on all your podcasting stuff. That said, I am excited for today's topic. I don't know if I should be excited for today's topic because it's always changing every single day as far as what should landlords be doing? What should real estate investors be doing? What the hell should we ever be doing with anything in our lives right now? And today's topic is specifically on landlords, real estate, the changes in the economy, whether or not we should be holding them and doubling down, or whether or not we should be folding them, possibly selling, maybe moving to other different markets, states, so forth, the laws, the memorandums, the evictions situations, the forbearances, the lockdowns again, everything that's happening. Is this good or bad for real estate? And should we be getting more rentals, or should we be selling our rentals? We have a handful of amazing experts with us today. I am excited to have Mr. Enrique Jevons and Mrs. Jennifer Beadles with us, and along, of course, with Jay Scott. And two of these people on the panel are super duper experts, and the other two are people that like to show up every single week and talk to each other. So that said, let's introduce our panelists. The first and foremost is the lovely Jennifer Beadles. Jennifer is the owner of Agents Invest. Jennifer is an investment-focused real estate broker, specializes in buy and hold investment properties, and has been since 2009. She has been investing in rental properties for 13 years now, owns 239 units herself personally, with a portfolio comprised of value-add multifamily properties across multiple states. Jennifer has used the build-to-rent strategy, BRRRR, fixed and flip, supported living, and she has experience self-managing. She's the broker and owner of Agents Invest, a real estate investment-focused brokerage in Seattle, Washington, that has partnered with multiple out-of-state investors agents. Jennifer works to streamline the process of selecting markets, sourcing on and off-market deals for investors. Because you also are, how many markets are you in? Because I just want everybody to know she doesn't really invest in Seattle. She invests out of state. And so she just happens to live everywhere right now in an RV. But which markets are you in? Where you have most of your units, and where do you help other people find their units and so forth?
Yeah. So we help our community buy rental properties in 26 different markets across the U.S. We're adding new markets every day. I think we just added a couple markets in Vermont, so maybe we're up to 28 now. I personally own in 6 different markets, 5 different states.
Perfect. And we'll get into that more later. Second, is Mr. Enrique Jevons, a lifelong friend of mine for the last few years. And Enrique is the owner of Jevons Property Management. Enrique is a licensed insured property manager and real estate managing broker. He has graduated from San Francisco State University with a bachelor's degree in science and business administration. Oh, that's good, right? So does everybody else. Over 20, except for me, I dropped out. For over 20 years, he worked in hospitality management at Hyatt Hotels, Stanford University, and Marriott Hotels while investing in rental portfolios. Enrique Jevons owns and operates Jevons Property Management with over 102 rentals personally and over 600 units. Still 600, or you got more units that you run?
Yeah, we're up to 678 as of today.
678 as of today. Enrique has a tremendous amount of depth and experience in multiple counties, multiple landlord situations, multiple laws. I once asked him one time if he ever did an eviction. And instead of saying yes or no, he spent an hour explaining to me how to do an eviction. I was at the end of it, and I said, well, you could have just told me yes or no. That's all I wanted to know. But he has a lot of knowledge, and I love having him on here. What episode of the BP podcast were you on?
146. So 146, it seemed, pretty early on. It seems like, a long time ago now.
It was actually, yeah.
But it was, I guess.
That was like 2016 or 2017.
It feels like just yesterday, but when I think about it now, there are over 300 or so podcasts. And of course, now they're up to multiple podcasts, right, Jay Scott? All sorts of podcasts going on.
Awesome. All right, Enrique, we're going to dig into your depth of knowledge here soon. Jay Scott, once again, my dear friend, entrepreneur, technologist, investor, advisor, host of the Bigger Pockets Business Podcast, author of 4 Bigger Pockets books, including the book on flipping houses, the book on investing in rehab costs, the book on negotiating real estate, and recession-proof investing. I think I have this memorized. Real estate investors he's a real estate investor that completed over 400 deals since 2008. Flips, buy and holds, multifamily notes, lending, development. You just did a massive syndication in Houston, and you are crushing it every single day. You just piss excellence when you wake up. Welcome, Jay Scott. Nice to have you.
Wow. You did not get that bio from my wife. That's for sure.
Fair enough. All right. So a lot of stuff happening right now in the world. And so let's jump into our topic. So first and foremost, there is a lot of different. So with real estate, we all kind of assume like, oh, let's talk about the real estate market, right? You're like, well, that's kind of a weird term because there is no like one market in real estate. There's real estate, right? And there's multiple markets, multiple facets, multiple niches, and so forth. You can say the stock market all day, right? But it's hard to say just the real estate market. And so let's talk specifically about rentals, right? And let's kind of keep it around single family, condos, small units, that kind of stuff for at least the time being. Maybe some multifamily, we'll dig into that. And I want to kind of like right now, we just had certain states are starting to lock down quite a bit. And we have some markets that are starting to be pretty much affected by this, like rather dramatically, actually, as far as rentals are concerned and the rental market. And Enrique, the other day we were talking, you had mentioned what's going on even in just Seattle. And we're going to talk about Seattle for just a moment. But for those of you guys who are watching, this is going to carry over to a lot of other markets. So that's why we're going to bring it up as an example. So since we locked down again in that market, in that major city, San Francisco is another major city, LA is a major city, West Coast major city, Portland, right? Multiple cities across the US are having these same circumstances. What is happening in the rental market that you've seen in your market in Seattle?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. Been a wild ride for 2020. Certainly rental properties. The reason why I got into that, part of the reason is because it's such a stable, predictable thing. Real estate licenses, you're trying to sell real estate, your income can just dramatically swing year to year, right? But if you're managing rental properties, you get rental properties of your own, it's a very stable, steady income, very predictable income. Well, 2020's been a wild ride here. So I pulled up some stats to take a look at essentially, the trends that have been going on. Certainly, it's what I've been able to feel, and that is certain that people are moving out of the bigger cities, the more densely populated cities. They're moving to the less dense areas, specifically suburbs. Now, this is obviously made easier by so many companies deciding that they're allowing their workers to work from home. So you've got Amazon is the prime example in Seattle, where they had majority of their employees are working from within Seattle, downtown Seattle. They have a huge headquarters there. Well, so everybody's living right there so that they can walk to work or take a bus to work and just easily get to work. And of course, nowadays they're all working from home. So then what's the purpose of paying this really high rent if you don't have to go to work anymore? You can just work from home.
So you're saying so you have these major cities, right? Including New York's included in this, New Jersey included on this. And you have all these people that love living in downtown Seattle Seattle cities, or not Seattle cities, downtown cities, that where you're allowed to go have these amenities. You can walk to work, you can go to restaurants, you can go to your big, huge condo units, gym and pool and rooftop decks and all this great stuff. But they can't do that right now. They have elevators and all that stuff. So what is that doing specifically that you're seeing right now? We'll talk to Seattle.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
To the rental market right now there. Is it going up, going down? What's happening?
Yeah, that's it. So when you're paying these high rents in locations in big cities, it's because of all the different amenities that are available to you there. So if you're renting, let's say, a condo in a high rise, it's because they've got a lot of amenities. They have an exercise room, they've got rooftop decks, they've got public common area spaces. There's restaurants, bars right in the immediate vicinity. Then, of course, there's theaters and all sorts of touristy activities that you can do. Well, if this is all shut down during the pandemic, and even within your own building, you can't even go to your own exercise room because it's shut down, why pay for that? Especially if you're in a high rise where you've got an elevator. Now, if you're in an elevator, people don't want to be all smashed together sharing the elevator. So pretty soon you're having to wait to the 7th floor, 10th floor of where your condo is. So for that reason, people are moving away from the cities, and that's dramatically affected rents in the area, specifically Seattle. The month of October versus month of October last year is down 12.2%. That's a year-over-year number. But there are other cities that are down.
Is that 12% of the rental price or 12% of
that's the average rents?
Average
rent, yeah.
Average rents in Seattle have gone down 12%.
City of Seattle average rent has gone down in the month of October, 12.2%. Yep. So huge drop. San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, very similar numbers as well. The other reasons are that people are starting to move as well. We've had a lot of people moving around is because they need more space. So as you're working from home now, whereas if you're, let's say, a couple and you're in a studio, a 1-bedroom apartment that was fine before when you're both going to work. Now, if you're both from home, you can't be in the 1 bedroom doing Zoom calls together. You've got to, scale up to 2 bedrooms. So people are scaling up. They're getting 2 bedrooms, whereas 1 was fine, or they're getting 3 or 4 bedrooms because also their kids are at home. So my kids are at home right now, and they're on Zoom calls all day, every day, because they're, doing their schoolwork from home. So they each need their own bedrooms. I've got my office space. My wife is using a space where everybody's on Zoom and working away. So that's impacted the rental market significantly as well. And it's been a roller coaster. So like in the very beginning, March, April, when things were first starting to happen, we first had these lockdowns, nobody moved. Everybody was like frozen, kind of not knowing what's going to happen. But then come May, that's when all this scaling up and moving out of the city started happening. And so you get the suburban rental prices have been going up dramatically as a result.
And we've been seeing that in multiple markets. Like some areas are crushing it right now, and other areas are declining, like you just said, Seattle, as well as like the other major cities that are, especially seems to be the major cities that have the most lockdown restrictions because the amenities are shutting down and because there's no reason to live downtown and pay these higher prices and all this kind of stuff. So Jennifer, you help other people invest, and then you also invest in cities that it seems like aren't shutting down and aren't having all these challenges and issues and so forth. Can you explain what you're seeing? And let's talk cities, right? We'll go into the suburbs here soon. What are you seeing in what markets, and can you name some specifically that you're seeing a slightly different story?
Yeah. So really quick. So the way that we target markets is we look for population growth and job growth. So job growth has been a little tricky this year because of all the lockdowns and the unemployment. But there's some certain areas that we've found great opportunities and that have not shut down and have not had major impacts related to COVID. So San Antonio is one of those. So the majority of the jobs that were, quote unquote, lost earlier in this year have pretty much recovered in San Antonio. So San Antonio is doing really well. Certain markets in Tennessee. So I love this market. It's about 45 minutes outside of Nashville. It's called Clarksville, Tennessee. The population has increased by 50% over the last 17 years. So this is a market that's growing. And it's not on a whole lot of investors' radar. I bought an 8-plex there last year. It has increased in value, so it's appreciated. And we've still been able to increase rents this year. So where we were renting units for 2-bedroom, 1-bath units for $725 last year, we're actually getting $775 this year. So the rents are significantly going up. The city of Clarksville, I think, was shut down maybe for a week this year. And that's it. Everyone's wearing masks, but here I've been in Tennessee for about the last 30 days, and everything is open. Obviously there's social distancing in place. People are wearing masks, but we have not seen the shutdowns like in these larger cities. Chattanooga, Tennessee, is another one. Chattanooga is about 90 miles outside of Atlanta. Tennessee is a non-income tax state, and they are seeing some inward population movement for people that can work remotely, that want to get out of the big cities, the concrete jungle, as I call it, and into areas where it's, quality lifestyle for families. There's good schools, properties are affordable. Chattanooga actually, I don't know if they still hold this record, but they at one point had the fastest internet in the entire United States. And it's interesting. So the city of Chattanooga had actually invested in the infrastructure to have the fastest internet in the United States. So I look for cities that are investing in the growth of the city and also attracting major employers. And also, that's something that, as we're on this RV trip, we purchased a property in Chattanooga earlier this year. Never been there. Didn't really know much about the market other than that the demographics looked fantastic. Put a team together, bought a property, and then actually visited it for the first time. And it's a beautiful city. Great weather, some pretty moderate climate. And again, non-income tax state. There's a lot of downtown development that's happening. So that's another great market. Columbus, Ohio, we're seeing a ton of deals happening there, a ton of BRRRR opportunities. So that's, what I feel like is an undervalued market. And so you can buy properties that are going to get instant appreciation as a value add opportunities, and also some
guaranteed.
Yeah. I mean, it's nothing's a guarantee in real estate, but so I think that there's a lot of, it's very different. I still own quite a few properties in Western Washington. I never really bought into the, Seattle market, the city of Seattle, but I own properties in Western Washington. And, obviously everything has stayed rented. Our tenants have been paying, but it's a little bit disappointing because I've seen rents go up as, units have come vacant, but we can't increase rents right now. So in Western Washington, our hands are tied, right? Yeah. We got tenant, we're all tenanted. Obviously they're staying and they're paying, but we're not able to increase rents. Whereas in other markets, we are. It's very different across the board.
So is there a, so let's talk about that. Like, as far as we mentioned a bunch of different markets, and Jay, chime in here too. People are, some of these I've seen it a lot of, I have left, right? I'm in Hawaii right now. So but some of us are leaving where we were from, where we're going, we're changing because we're remote working, and that is affecting the rental market, some negative, but some very positively. But what are some factors that are creating people to want to what, if I'm an investor, which I am, and I'm looking to go investigate new markets, right? What are some stats that I should be tracking, or some, matrices that I should be looking at to see, hey, is this going to be a good market to invest in? Jay, do you want to start and we can go from there?
Sure. I mean, well, there's always the historical important, the three biggies, as Brian Burke likes to refer to them: population growth, employment growth, and wage growth. So there you go. Hands-Off Investor. Great book for anybody that's interested in passively investing in syndications from Brian Burke. But if you're a buy and hold investor, those are the three big things you should be looking for in any market. Again, population growth, employment growth, wage growth, because ultimately those are the three things that are going to feed into rental demand and ultimately market rent growth. So certainly look for those three things. A fourth one that I like to add into the list, especially these days in this uncertain time when things are going nuts, is employment diversity. You don't really want to be investing in any area that's reliant on one industry, because if that industry should go bust, and there are a lot of industries right now that are struggling, for example, I try and stay away from areas that are too heavily reliant on tourism. I do like Florida. There are good parts of Florida, but there are certain parts of Florida that are so reliant on tourism that if we see a downturn in the economy that doesn't recover for a couple of years, we could see some difficulty investing in those areas. So employment diversity is another big one. And then the other thing is just following the trends. So like we've been talking about, people moving out of cities into suburbs, people moving from high tax states into low tax states. I know Enrique and I were talking, or we were talking, all of us, about this yesterday, and Enrique's belief is that after COVID's over, people are going to start moving into the cities. I agree with him. I think people are going to move back into the cities, but I don't think it's going to be the same people that left. I think it'll be new people that move in that see, okay, market rents have dropped, values have dropped. I have an opportunity to get into Seattle now, whereas a year or two or three ago, it was too expensive. So the people that move out of Seattle into the suburbs may be there to stay, but new people will move in. But that begs the question: is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? Is it longer? So be cognizant that anytime you rush into an area that has seen a downturn and think, okay, well, COVID's almost over. As soon as COVID's over, everything's going to go back to normal. That might be the case, but we don't know that. So make sure you understand what your downside risk is and be willing to accept that. But other than that, the fundamentals really haven't changed that much. And this may be an opportunity to get into some locations, some areas for less than you could before, because we might be seeing a softening rental market, which means landlords are going to drop their prices. But at the end of the day, fundamentals are fundamentals, and COVID has changed things short term. But I think long term, just focus on the fundamentals.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So the topic today is, hold them, right? Or should we buy, sell our properties, sell them or hold them? Right now is a great opportunity, I think, for people who own, for example, single-family homes. The mortgage rates right now for single-family homeowners is so low, incredibly low, that it's a fantastic time to sell single-family homes. So if you have those as a rental, you can still, even though there's eviction moratoriums going on in many places, state of Washington does still allow you to sell your single-family home. You can just give a 60-day notice to the existing tenants, and you can still get them out that way and sell. So it is a very unique, opportune time to sell. But then, of course, that also begs the question of, well, what do you do with that money then? It's kind of like, selling stock. You can sell stock too, go to cash, but then what are you going to do with that money? You need to do something. And that's where I think that real estate right now is a great opportunity to sell your single-family homes, maybe a duplex. You sell those smaller ones. You try and pull your money together, especially if you have like a couple of single-family homes. You can sell them, go into a larger property, go into a duplex, a fourplex, and start working your way up the ladder there. So this is a really good time for people to adjust their portfolio.
And it's not, when it comes to what they do with it, I know some landlords right now that are selling because they're scared of what might be happening in the future, or they want to they want to liquidate so that they're liquid. Now, I also look at them like, well, you're putting all your money in one bank, right? So like, you might want to think, if you're that scared, then why are you doing that? But I know a handful of those. But what do you say to those landlords that are looking at real estate going like, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to sell everything and cash my chips in and hold on to it.
Okay, so if you're going to sell everything, cash your chips in because you're so fearful, then you know what? It's not the market for you. You need to get into some different type of investing. But, what are you going to do with the money? I mean, if you just put it in a bank account and make 0 to less than 1% interest, inflation is going to eat up your money. Certainly, when you go to sell, then it becomes you could be subject to capital gains tax and have to pay a lot of tax on it there. So you need to be thinking about strategies of what exactly you're going to do with that money before you make that decision to sell. Certainly, you need to be making sure that you're letting, for example, your real estate broker know if you're going to sell and you want to buy another property in advance. You're going to want to do a 1031 exchange, set that up in advance. I can tell you stories of people who, have had this idea they're going to 1031, but they don't tell me until the last minute. And title companies can't set up 1031 exchanges just overnight. I mean, these things take, a lot of paperwork and planning and such. And so you got to think about exactly beyond just selling, and that is what are your goals and what are your future plans, and what kind of risk tolerance you have.
We're investors, right? So we should be thinking that way, right? And then, go ahead.
Everybody needs to understand what the cost of selling is if you're thinking about selling in this market. I'm not going to tell anybody not to sell if they have a good reason, if they've thought about it. But too often I see people that don't really think about it. And Enrique just mentioned inflation, which to me is it's an important reason, like not to go to cash, but it's probably the least important reason of all the reasons I could list here. Because if you think about it, let's say we're at 2% inflation right now. We're probably actually less than that, which is crazy. But let's say we're at 2%. Let's say even say 3% inflation. Let's say you go to cash for a year or 2 years. So you're losing 3%, 4%, 5%. Not fun. But that pales in comparison to when you sell your property. How much does it cost you to sell? Well, you're probably paying 3% to an agent. You're probably paying 1 or 2% for closing costs and to a title company and for transfer taxes, depending on your state. Then you're probably paying taxes on any gains that you had. So you might be losing another 10, 12, 14, 15% there. All said and done, 3%, 4%, 5% in inflation, but you're losing another 20% in taxes and commissions and closing costs. So at the end of the day, if you lose, let's say 20% of your sale, you walk away with 80 after everything's paid, and it's probably going to be less than that, but let's say 80, you've lost 20%. Well, here's the math on percentages. You lose 20% to get back to your 100K. You don't just need to gain 20% on your 80,000. You now need to gain 25%. So for that 20% hit, just to get back to even, you need to make 25%.
And those are just the economic costs. So exactly. You also got to think about the opportunity costs, right?
Yep.
So even though you're losing money there's the opportunity that you had to be either making more money or putting your money in another investment that's making 8% interest, right?
Jennifer, we'll ignore you. Go ahead. What do you got to add?
Yeah, I mean, the only regret I've ever had as a real estate investor is selling my properties. And so I think about all of the flips over the years that I'm like, oh, had I just put a tenant in there and held on to that thing, I mean, I would be on a beach somewhere, right? The Bahamas. I don't own an island in the Bahamas by now. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I get that real estate investing can be an emotional game, but I think that as investors, we have to work on our mindset and we have to surround ourselves with other people who think bigger than us. And everyone that I've ever known that has had great success in real estate, they are long-term hold investors. And so right now they're looking at opportunities on, where can I put some money and ride this wave? How can I get into markets maybe that are more affordable to me or would be, markets that are really going to take off. So yeah, I would say, I mean, if you're stressed out about what's happening right now, obviously you're going to have to make your own decision, but there's a lot of opportunity out there. The interest rates, I mean, I can't believe that I'm saying this now. Let's see, we're 8 years later. In 2012, I said, we will never see interest rates this low again. And then here we are, 2020, and it's like, we will never see interest rates this low again. They're actually lower right now than they were in 2012. And so obviously that's not the reason to invest, but it is another reason to invest. So right now I'm taking my portfolio and I'm doing some cash out refinances and I'm kind of moving stuff around. We're doing some 1031 exchanges on, properties that are just kind of a pain, and, doing 1031s, buying, bigger buildings right now, nicer buildings. That's another thing, I think right now that there's properties are still trading for a pretty high price in some markets. And so if you have properties that are just a headache, so like I have a friend of mine, he owns 85 units in downtown Seattle. And I'm just now getting him warmed up to the idea of investing in other markets. So he can sell a building and get 5 times that in a market that's growing, that has fantastic demographics, that's really going to take off, in the next couple of years while getting cash flow along the way. So I think that there's some great opportunities right now.
Yeah, for those people who are wanting to hold right now, it's also a unique, wonderful opportunity to hold because of the refinancing opportunities. And that's something that I've also been doing this year, is I've refinanced 3 of my properties this year. And you've got these high valuations going on still. So high valuations, low interest rate. It's a perfect ideal opportunity for holding on to properties.
I refinanced 10 this month.
Sweet.
So I'm one of those people that have never pulled cash out of any of our rentals, like ever. I've always left everything in, and all of our rentals are BRRRRs, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeats. So we've built in a lot of equity into our properties through just taking our years of flipping and transferred into rentals. But we never pulled any cash out. Like even if we didn't get our full appraisal back, we just left it in. Who cares? Or even if we did, we left it in. Who cares?
You mean you didn't pull out more cash than you had into?
Yeah, exactly. We never did that. And so but this year was the first time that we pulled cash out of a number of our rentals, just because we're like, well, there's a ton of equity in those, right? So let's do that. And the rates are so low. I come from a background of, I was a financial planner during the crash. And also I helped evaluate people's mortgages and debts and stuff back then when rates were lower in 2006 and 2000, that kind of stuff. And I always told people to stop refinancing just because they would reset, because I wanted people to pay their stuff off. So they would reset the interest every time that they refied their personal home back to a 30-year, and they pay more interest even though they had a lower interest rate. And so that kind of still sticks in my head of like, well, I got interest rates that were 4% or 4.5% just a few years ago. Why would I refi down to 3? It's actually probably going to cost me more, right? And over time, depending on how I was doing it. So it was kind of a battle for me to want to do that, but I did, and I'm happy I have a bunch of cash in the bank from those.
Yeah, so there are obviously many different ways to do it, because you can do cash out refinances. You could just refinance the property and not pull any cash out. You can also do what's called a readjustment of the rate. So if you've got a property, let's say, for example, that is at a 6% interest rate that you got, 10 years ago, 12, 15 years ago, and rates were higher, right? You can go to the bank and ask them if they will consider readjusting the rate. Typically, they will do that for a fee. But it's going to be a very, very small, minor fee, and you don't have to go through all of the closing cost expenses involved in a refinance. You just get that readjustment, and there you go. You're saving yourself money.
And this would be like through like a portfolio lender, or like one of your local credit unions that would typically.
Yeah. So in my particular case, I did it with a local credit union where I called them up. This was a couple of years ago even. I called them up and said, hey, tell me about opportunities for refinancing or readjusting the rate. And we did the math, and the readjustment of rate turned out to be a much better deal for me, because I do hold on properties typically. And so it is something you want to ask your bank. Don't just ask them about the refinance opportunities. Ask them about a readjustment of a rate as well.
Got it.
Keep in mind, I mean, when we talk about refinancing, debt or leverage, whatever term you want to use, is one of the most dangerous things in the world. You over leverage and you can end up, like a lot of people will tell you after 2008, destitute. But at the same time, the intelligent and smart use of debt or leverage is probably one of the most powerful financial concepts in the world. And if you use debt well, one, you can increase your returns. So we use the term leverage to refer to debt a lot because that's what it is. It's a lever. It's what you're boosting your returns by pulling money out if you do it correctly. If you can get your interest rate down below your cap rate, you're going to increase your returns. But number two, there aren't too many tax-free sources of money in this world. But one of the few tax-free sources of money is refinance, is debt against a property. If I go out and refinance a property and pull out $1 million right now, it's one of the few ways I can get $1 million in my pocket without the government coming and taking their cut. So not only do I get the leverage boost in terms of returns, but I get this money that I don't have to pay taxes on, but I can use to earn over and over and over into the future. So I don't have that problem of what I was talking about before, where you pay taxes, you lose 20%. You now have to earn 25% to get back to even. With refinance money, you started even, you don't have to pay any taxes. And so everything is gravy.
Yeah, I want to make sure people understand it right. It's because it's your money. You're just moving the money from an asset that you own to a bank account, but it's still your money, so it's not a taxable event, versus selling the property. That is a taxable event, and that's where you can be paying either short-term, long-term capital gains taxes.
So let's change it up. Let's talk about now where, so we're all on the same page. Everybody's out there like, okay, if you're going to sell 1031, if you can, right? And if you're going to, keep it, why don't you look at refinancing and maybe even adjusting your rate if you can? Because there's also talking about like, how do you increase your return? How do you maintain your return that you're getting on that property to begin with? And if you're thinking really long term, then it's just a blip in the road. There's people that I've talked to over the years. They're like, I've been investing for 30 years or whatever, and they're like, ask me about what happened in the early 90s, or ask me what happened in late 2000, or ask me what happened in the 80s. Right? You go like, it was a 3-year period. It sucked, but the rest of it was great. Or you're like, especially when you're thinking 50 years, 40 years, like you just a blip, right? As you start going with it. It's Jay and I talked about this, I think, on our last, one of our last episodes we just did, where him and I have had a challenge thinking long-term when it comes to real estate, because him and I flipped so many houses. And that's like been my biggest thing I've had to overcome over the years, is to grow up as an investor. And like my first time I did a 1031 exchange, I finally felt like I was an actual real investor, like for the very first time. And so I'm still like a toddler when it comes to buy and hold. I'm like an old dude with flips, but like I'm a toddler when it's buy and hold thing, right? And I want it now. I want give me, right? Like the immediate what's that thing? Whatever. So immediate gratification or whatever.
Immediate gratification.
So, yeah, there you go. Yeah. Just like kids. And so, but that on to, there's all these laws, there's all this situation. We hear about these people that are going through forbearances for their primary residences, right? And that is a huge issue that's going to come up in 2021 in some capacity, and we don't know the full ramifications of all these millions and millions of people's in forbearances. They think they're okay, right? But as long as they have a job and as long as they can pay their mortgage, yeah, they are going to be okay. They'll do probably loan modification and move on, right? But if they don't, or they're still furloughed, this could be an issue, major issue, because they're going to be rudely surprised to find out that they can't load mod and extend out their loan. So when it comes to landlords, what are we seeing on the landlord side when it comes to forbearances? Because there are units that are bad tenants that they can't evict, and now they can't pay their mortgages. Are landlords taking these forbearances? Are we seeing any of that out there?
Yes, some are taking advantage of the forbearance. I certainly looked into it in the beginning just to see what opportunities there were with that. And what I quickly learned is that that's a very bad thing to do. It's kind of like declaring bankruptcy. Sure, you can declare bankruptcy and wipe out all this debt, but then nobody's going to lend to you. So with forbearance, yeah, you can put off then payments, but you're eventually still going to have to make the payment to the bank. They're still going to want their money. They're just telling you, you don't have to pay us right now. You just got to pay us the money later. The problem is that it kills your credit score. And your credit score is so important as to, being able to borrow money at, a low rate. And so I would highly recommend people do not think about forbearance as a way out.
Yeah. I mean, your primary residence, you lost your job. So that's what I guess that they have that for, because of the chaos of the world right now. But if you're an investor, you're talking about like you're basically shooting yourself in the foot to do future properties. Jennifer, you had something you wanted to add?
Yeah. So we had a lot of investors in our community ask about that, and we advised against it because of, it's going to be tough to get loans after that, right? So what lender is going to give you a loan after you applied for forbearance? And who knows how long that's going to stay on these records? I mean, it's, too soon to tell. But it's interesting to have a lot of investors that were successful in getting PPP funds. Obviously, that ship has sailed. I don't think that they're offering that anymore. They
are doing the EIDL. So
yeah. We have an investor in our community who's using EIDL funds to do short-term rentals, and is making a killing. So they should read their EIDL paperwork, but they're not technically allowed to do that. So, but hopefully. But hey, it's like the wild, wild west with the SBA loans right now. So who knows what they're ever going to do with that kind of crap? Like I can't imagine them, SBA being able to enforce even a fraction of what they even like put out there. It's just chaos, printing money to all these people. But that's a side note, just so we know. There's actually a clause. I should show it to you guys sometime. I looked at an EIDL. There's an actual clause in there that doesn't say if you default or if you don't pay it. It's in a whole nother section that basically says that the SBA can sell your assets at any price they set, right? Based on that, whatever entity you put on. And you would think, if you default. Nope. It's a whole nother section, right? That says at any time they can do that. So now that's just something to look at, but besides the point, right? Anyways, it also says you can't lend that money out. It also says you can't use it to invest. So, but
along those lines, you really got to watch out with commercial loans, because of the fact that commercial loans, really, it's up to each individual lender, each individual bank as to, what kind of rules they want to, enforce. Whereas for conventional loans, those are loans, under a certain dollar amount. I think the dollar amount just went up, didn't it, for 2021? And it's abiding by the the federal guidelines as far as loans go, right? But commercial loans, so this would be any property that is 5 or more units. We're talking about residential property, of course. So 5+ units is automatically a commercial loan, but commercial loans can still be done for single-family homes even. Those are typically called portfolio loans within the bank. The bank holds them within their portfolio. When they do that, they can set any rules they want, which can be good and bad, because you can negotiate with the bank as to, how about, you lend me this and, at these different terms. But on the other hand, you can't just take it for granted that what the terms are. So just as Tarl mentioned, you got to read the paperwork, make sure you know what you're getting into when you get into a commercial loan.
Yeah, if it's a conform, Fannie, Freddie's buying it, that kind of stuff, there's a whole set of rules for them. But everybody else pretty much writes their own rules, right? As long as you're not living in the house personally, like it's your primary. So this doesn't always bleed over on the investment world. So Jennifer, let me ask you a question. So there's still an eviction moratorium out there, right? There's still, you can't, there's there's landlords that are having troubled tenants, right? We had a tenant in a property we were about to buy, for instance, in February, that was already getting evicted. Like they were horrible. Like they were tearing it up, destroyed it, hadn't paid for 6 months, all this stuff. They were getting evicted. Then the moratorium hit right before the court date, right, was going to be scheduled. Court shut down, couldn't evict them. They finally got evicted in October, for instance, right? It took that long to finally get to that point where they can do it because it reopened back up. But this whole time, this poor landlord, right? We didn't own it. This poor landlord was dealing with this whole time, right? And they wanted to sell it. We're not buying it. Right? So all that situation. So you take circumstances like that. Let's say you are a landlord or you're working with somebody that's a landlord. What kind of things can landlords do to help prevent this, of course, potentially, and also what can they do if they are in these situations where they have these troubled tenants and they can't do something about it?
Yeah. I mean, I think communication is key. And then also making sure a lot of tenants, they might not know about the different programs that are available to them. So we have a couple of our tenants, we had our property through our property managers, because we use property managers for everything. Property managers distributed to them all of the local resources for them to get access to funding. And so some of our tenants who, this is mostly, a couple of months ago where they were waiting on unemployment funds and there was kind of like this backlog in different areas, but they were able to get short-term funds from different like local nonprofits. And so making sure that your property managers are aware of those resources and also giving them to the tenants. So that's step one, right? Making sure that the tenants are applying for these things, are applying for unemployment, having access to these different resources so that they can pay rent. I think the next thing is just, is communication. So we've had a couple of tenants who couldn't pay, and our property managers basically just did a great job of saying, look, you don't want an eviction on your record. This thing is going to be over at some point. Why don't we help you move out and then get another tenant in, right? So fortunately, we haven't really had that many issues just because our property managers have done a fantastic job at staying in front of these tenants, making sure that they have the resources, and then just getting the ones out who can't pay out without having evictions on their record or having, all these late pays and things that are going to show up later. So I think Enrique probably has more to add on that, but I think the property managers really make or break an investment, right? I mean, you could buy the best deal in the world, but if you have a horrible property manager that's not able to take care of the property for you, it's not going to be a good investment. So,
yeah, exactly. So, and on top of everything Jennifer said, other things that you can do certainly is cash for keys, where you're offering the tenant some money, or you're telling them, we'll give you back your security deposit, just leave. You can offer them to break their lease at no cost so that they can move into a more affordable place. So there are opportunities. You can put together payment plans for them so that they are just like forbearance, loans with banks. They put together a payment plan. You put together a payment plan where they can stretch out payments over time. But definitely what I found is that the pandemic has magnified everything. It's accelerated everything. And so just as it's accelerated and boosted, for example, Amazon and home deliveries of everything. So now they're doing better than they ever did. It's not that we wouldn't get to the point in the years from now. It's just accelerated. Well, it's accelerated problems within the real estate industry as well. And what I mean by that is that you get tenants that were just on the edge financially. Something like this comes along, boom, it wipes them out. And so it's just accelerated the problem for them, or it's accentuated the problem that they already have, which is just, living the paycheck to paycheck and not having cash reserves. So that's where it is more important than it ever was. Not that it was ever not important, but it's just more important that everybody screen their tenants. It's not just like the old days where you would just meet the tenant in person and you think, wow, this person seems like, a really great person. I'm sure that they're going to take good care of my property. Right now, you need to look at their past, because it's that past history that tenant has that's going to be the predictor of how they're going to do in the future. So how well they pay their debts off in the past by looking specifically in detail at their credit reports, that's going to really show how good of a tenant they are going to be in the future as far as taking their debts.
Everybody's got a story. And so in all of us are innocent and we're all the heroes in our story. So it's just knowing, right? Like, just as far as people are concerned, it's what we all are. I'm not a bad person, right? So that said though, like I remember Steve Rosenberg, our good buddy Steve, he had mentioned one time that because Seattle has some that's where we're from, but I have no properties in Seattle anymore. Like they're all in different suburbs outside of it. But he had mentioned, I'm like, hey, a lot of people are looking at these certain markets where all these landlord laws are and all this stuff and so restricting. And he's just like, look, the reality is that most of those landlord laws are designed for bad landlords and also bad tenants, right? Like, so it's like, if you're not a really bad landlord and you're really good at screening your tenants and stuff like that, and you get the right tenants, then none of these laws really apply into you when it comes to it. So as long as you did your work up front, I guess, right? And you're not and you don't have a bad property manager, right? When it comes to, I guess that's huge. And you are not a bad landlord, right? If all your units, all these new laws are affecting you directly, it's probably a reason for that. In my opinion, that happened years ago. in some capacity and should look at
knowledge is key. You just have to know what the rules are. You've got to know what the laws are. I also think you need to participate in the setting of those laws and so that
you should have seen that.
Have a voice right at the table. But if you know what the rules are and you can follow the rules better than anybody else, then you're going to succeed. You're going to succeed really well. Certainly, if I had properties, across the United States, I don't. Mine are all within the state of Washington. If I had properties all across the United States, even though I'm a property manager, I would never dream of managing those properties myself. I would for sure have others manage it because every city has different laws. And so you can't be an expert, it's very hard to be an expert in every single city across the United States. So that's where it's so important to, of course, leverage other people's knowledge. So just as you're trying to leverage money, leverage other people's time, you leverage other people's knowledge, because you're not going to be the all-knowing, person for everything in the world.
Absolutely. So I call Jay all the time. Like, Jay, what do I do today? Tell me. I don't know what's going on in my investment career. I don't even know what I should do. And I call him all the time. But actually, most of us do that. Most of us reach out to, part of the networking is part of that, right? Why do you network? Why do you go on Bigger Pockets? Why do you go on these Facebook groups? Why do you join our webinars? Why do you our shows and stuff? I would think it's to meet and gain knowledge from other investors, but also meet other investors to gain knowledge from and build relationships with. All four of us, trust me, when we don't, there's something going on, especially when COVID hit, all of us were calling each other. Everybody's calling each other. What do you got going on? What do you think? What do you think? And we're trying to gain that knowledge from each other as much as possible. So let's speak about that for a second, Jay. Let's get crazy. This is my favorite topic. Let's go. Let's get crazy. Let's speculate, right? Let's speculate. So we have, I heard there's an election. I heard there's stuff going on politically out there. I don't know. I'm on the beach all day now.
When's the election?
I don't even know, right? I couldn't even tell you, legitimately. Did it happen already? But there's some things potentially coming down the pipeline in the real estate world, and there's some stuff that might not. There's some things that might happen in the future that, when it comes to, how long will the moratoriums last? There's some stuff. Who knows what's going to happen with forbearances? Are we going to have to pay more capital gains tax later or not on our properties? What does that do? Right? Jay, let's just BS for a little bit. What do we think what are some things that might happen in the future for real estate in 2021? Should the world change in one direction versus another?
Okay, I'm going to learn my lesson here. I was on I recorded the Bigger Pockets real estate podcast with Brenda and David a couple of days ago, and they asked that question. And apparently they reminded me at the end that I went on a 13-minute soliloquy about the economy. So I'm not going to do 13 minutes here.
You got 15.
Sweet. Okay. Now, a few things to think about. Right now, we are kind of in a weird spot. People talk about the economic cycle and where are we in the cycle? We're at the top, we're at the bottom, we on the way down, or we on the way up. I kind of think of right now as kind of outside the cycle. Right now, there's too many conflicting economic indicators. We have the stock market that hit an all-time high yesterday. The Dow hit an all-time high, and at the same time, we've got real unemployment at 15%, and 1 out of 8 people who can't afford food. So right now, it's a very weird economic time, and I like to think about it as everything right now is fake. And at some point, we come back to reality and we find ourselves somewhere on that economic cycle. We're at the top of the market, at the bottom.
Everything's fake?
Everything's fake.
Are we in the Matrix?
We are in the Matrix. That's essentially what we are. And at some point, everything's just going to kind of snap back to reality. And we can assess where we are, where the economy is. So what are those two big things that are going to lead us to getting back to reality? In my opinion, the two big things are we're going to see an end to the stimulus, or a significant cutback to the amount of money that the Fed is pumping into the system. And two, we're going to see an end, at least in the real estate world, to forbearances and mortgage evictions, tenant evictions. And so when those two things happen, we're going to get back to some steady state. Now, are we going to find ourselves at the top of the market at that point? Are we going to find ourselves at the bottom in a deep depression? We're going to find ourselves on the way down, on the way up? No idea. But at some point, the stimulus is going to stop, and I guess the third big thing is COVID is going to disappear. It's hopefully disappear, but at some point, COVID goes away, the foreclosures go, forbearances go away, more eviction moratorium goes away, and the stimulus goes away, and we find ourselves somewhere. Now, once we find ourselves there, then we can kind of take stock of where we are and where things are headed. Until then, I think it's anybody's guess. But there are a few things that I think we're likely to see. I think once the music stops and we end up back in reality, we are going to see a softening in the real estate market. I think it's unavoidable. I think a lot of what we're seeing in the real estate market right now in a lot of markets is due to inefficiency because we don't have a lot of supply. There are a whole lot of people who are terrified to list their house right now because because of COVID, they don't want people trouncing through their house. They don't want people like just coming in and they don't want to go out when they have to do showings. So we have very constrained supply. At some point, COVID's not going to be a factor anymore. And there are literally millions of people who are going to list their house for sale because they've been waiting a year and a half to list their house for sale. And so we're going to see supply numbers bump. And I think that's just naturally going to see a softening. I'm not saying we're going to see a 2008 crash. I'm not even going to saying we're going to see a 1990s crash. But we're going to see a softening in the market. Number two, I think long-term, we have to see inflation. We've printed so much money. And when you print money, when the Fed prints money, one of two things happens. We either see all that money flow to wealthy people, in which case we see asset inflation and we see wealth inequality. That's what we've seen. That's what we saw after 2008. We saw assets go up in value, but we didn't see a lot of just regular inflation. The price of milk didn't go up tremendously. The price of cars didn't go up tremendously, a little bit, but not tremendously. But the price of real estate went up and the price of collectibles went up and the price of other hard assets went up because the Fed printed all this money, handed it to wealthy people. What do wealthy people do with money? They invest it. Or the Fed hands the money down to people that need it, people that are struggling to eat, people that are losing their jobs. And then they start spending that money and spending that money and spending that money. If they do that, then we see what we refer to as CPI inflation, the increase in price in everyday stuff like milk and cars and butter and rent. So one way or another, we're going to see inflation, whether it's asset inflation or CPI inflation. Over the next few years, we're going to see inflation. Two best hedges, we've talked about this on previous shows, the two best hedges against inflation. Number one is real estate. When everything's going up in value, real estate's going up in value and rents are going up. So if you want to protect your money, buy real estate. Then if you want your absolute best hedge against inflation, not just protecting your money, but making money, take out debt against that real estate or whatever your assets are. Because at the end of the day, when things are going up in value, your mortgage is going up. The mortgage that you're charging your tenants is going up. Your wages are going up. Your salary is going up. But the one thing that's not going up is your debt. If you have $1,000 a month in mortgage payments right now, I don't care if prices of everything else double next year, you still have $1,000 in mortgage payment. If everything doubles in price, well, your salary or your wages have probably doubled as well. So now you're paying off that $1,000 in debt with twice as much salary or twice as much income. So debt is absolutely the best way to hedge against inflation. So two big things. I think we're going to see a softening in the market. Doesn't mean don't buy now. And I think we're going to see inflation, which is a good reason to start buying and to use a smart use of leverage right now. Up your real estate.
But what about I agree with everything you said, but to add on to it, like we've also heard that we never talked about this really on our show before, but a good hedge against inflation too, or at least a safety net would be gold and silver. What are your thoughts on that as well? That's a hard asset. So
yeah, absolutely. I think gold and silver are a great way to preserve wealth.
Preserve. I like that word. That's actually, I agree with that term. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So most likely at the end of whatever happens, whether the economy does well or the economy does poorly, most likely gold and silver are going to be within 10% of where they are. But there's a shot if excuse my language, the shit hits the fan and things get really bad, well, you may find that gold and silver are shooting up in value. That's what happened after 2008. And we've started to see that a little bit, but not tremendously right now. But if the shit hits the fan, then we're going to see gold and silver shoot up. So it could be a good investment. More likely, if you hold it long term, it'll probably fluctuate 5 or 10%, and so it's a good way of just preserving your wealth. Most likely better than currency, because of what Enrique was saying earlier. Just inflation that's going to eat away at your cash. But typically, gold and silver is going to at least keep pace with inflation.
Well, it's also like, I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, so we're not going to, because there's some people that are super passionate about Bitcoin, gold, silver, all that type of stuff. But what I've always understood about gold and silver is that it's not that gold and silver is changing value, it's that the dollar is changing value, which is changing, which is why it's reflecting on gold and silver more than, or at least the belief in the dollar or something like that.
There was 60, 70, 80 years where if you held gold and silver, you were barely beating inflation, if at all. Obviously, in the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen a spike and you've crushed inflation. But don't buy gold and silver as an investment. Buy it as either wealth preservation or as a hedge against a really, really, really bad thing happening in the economy.
Agreed. Preservation. Like it.
Yeah. So what I think is you always want to make sure that your portfolio is diversified so that you don't have everything, all your eggs in one basket. You've got to make sure that you're carrying real estate, you're carrying stocks, maybe you're carrying metals and such like that. The one thing obviously that's really nice about real estate is the fact that you can actually borrow money to make that. You can't borrow money to buy stocks, or metals, precious metals. So that is one unique advantage to real estate. So now is a fantastic time to purchase, because just as Jay mentioned, people are kind of in a holding pattern right now. People don't want to, leave their house to go be looking at other houses to purchase and everything. We're going to have a tremendous amount of pent-up demand. So come this summer, when most people are vaccinated and you're able to get out, life starts going on, right? You can have a tremendous amount of demand of people wanting to buy homes. So this is actually 2021 is going to be an outstanding year for real estate agents. If you're a real estate broker, get your real estate license. If you don't, you should get one. But if you've got one, 2021 is going to be a tremendous opportunity, because I do believe that people are going to be sick of the homes that they're currently in because they've been spending way too much time in their home, and they're going to decide on what they really, really, really want. And so maybe what they really want is to move to Hawaii, and they're going to go move to Hawaii, right? There's going to be people relocating all over the country as a result of sitting at home and thinking about their life and what they would rather be doing. So it's going to be an outstanding opportunity coming up to be a real estate agent.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like 2020 is the year of the mortgage broker. 2021 is the year of the agent. Yeah. And but I'd also say the agent and wholesaler, because
wholesalers,
because and so let's do this. Like, let's go round table. One last thing, right? Since we don't have a ton of questions, but one last thing we're going to add on is that, like, let's wrap this up. All right, each of us is going to go say, do we hold them, or do we hold our properties and potentially get more, or do we fold them and do something else? Like, what's our final advice on that? And if there's any other last piece of advice we want to give people investing long-term in real estate or landlords and so forth, and we'll just go through a circle on that, and we'll wrap up the show. So let's start with you, Jennifer.
Yeah. So hold, always long-term hold, 10 plus years at least. The only other thing I'd add, I see this trend of domestic travel is going to boom. I think people are going to be really hesitant to travel internationally once things open up. And I mean, I don't know if you guys saw, but Qantas yesterday put out, the CEO, that if you want to travel on Qantas Airlines, you must have the vaccine. So that'll be really interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah, I think domestic travel is going to boom. So, I'm looking at taking some of our existing units and beta testing short-term rentals. What would that look like? Can we drive NOI by putting some of our units into short-term rentals? So I think that's going to be an interesting play. Here I am with my family traveling in an RV. So we're looking at some potential RV park development opportunities. So I think that, it's going to be a lot of opportunity next year domestically. So looking forward to that.
Enrique.
I'm going to say sell your single family homes, buy multifamily, buy through Jennifer, because you shouldn't limit yourself to your own market. You want to expand your horizons and go to other markets. I also think that furnished rentals is going to be an opportunity because of the fact people like Tarl who want to go live in Hawaii for a little bit. And so there can be those people who want to try out a place for a bit. And so they'll be up with furnished rentals. That'll be an opportunity. Certainly holding, can't go wrong. Hold is a definite safe bet. So if you're just risk adverse, not sure what to do, hold them.
Yeah, I'm in a 6-month furnished rental right now. So yes, in Maui. Jay Scott.
I'm actually a buyer right now. And it's funny, a year ago when the market was probably a lot lower than it is now in most of the areas I own in 4 or 5 states, market was lower in all of them a year ago. And I was saying, I'm worried about the economy. And here we are a year later, and I'm probably more worried about the economy. Prices are much higher, and now I'm buying. I finally come to the realization that there's no bad time to buy. I'm buying for the next 10 years, 20 years, for my kids, for their kids. So whether I bought a year ago or 5 years ago or next year, it really doesn't matter. Sooner is probably better than later, and just let the long-term economic cycles play out. Asset values go up over time, and market rents go up over time. And so, if you're buying for the long term, now's as good as time as yesterday or tomorrow. Well, it's better than tomorrow. It's not as good as yesterday.
Awesome. And I am going to say that do your own strategy, figure out what your risk is for yourself. But in reality, actually, like, I'm a big fan of like, hey, hold them. I'm not selling. If I do sell, it's a 1031 exchange right now. And I'm still flipping. I'm flipping. I like flips. Like, there's some properties that just don't make sense for us to hold on to based on cash flow. So for us, I'm a big fan of equity and cash flow, not one or the other. And which is why we do the burst strategy. And we're not going to stop that. But for, and our note, like on it, it's just, I think that 2021, I do agree with what Enrique said. It's going to be the year of the agent. Especially as things start opening up a little bit more, but people are getting more comfortable with where they want to move, what they want to change into. And if you are a renter right now listening to this, going back to what Jay said about debt, my parents bought their first house finally about 2 years ago, I believe. And thank goodness that they did, just because you can only imagine that even though right now, most areas you can't increase rent, but if inflation continues to go up, everything else, rents go up too, right? Which is also great for landlords, but bad for tenants, especially if you're on a very fixed income in retirement, such as my parents. And so now they have a fixed debt cost on their mortgage. And despite what happens with inflation and despite what happens in the future, as long as they're not silly with that, they have a fixed cost, right? Which is a good way of leveraging debt to live now in a place versus they've been tenants since I was born, right? So and they finally have a house. So I would agree with, like, even if you don't have a house right now, maybe you should be looking to buy at this low cost to do that. And if you're an off-market marketer, I think next year is going to be an amazing year for you, potentially, depending on one major thing, which is how long do the forbearances last? So where the forbearances go, once forbearances are like, well, you got a loan mod now, right? Just be able to get caught back up in your mortgage, right? Or you got to refi fully, or you have to sell, or you go through foreclosure if you don't pay it. So there's going to be a lot of people that are going to go, well, now that we just, instead of paying this back or doing a loan mod, let's just sell since we have equity, right? And that's where I see it. And going back to Jay, I think that's going to normalize the market a bit in certain areas, more so than others. But this is market specific. So I'm buying. And I also know there's a lot of smarter people than me out there that are raising funds right now, specifically to start really buying in 2021. So watch out for that. And don't be one of those people that waits for the market to crash, because I don't believe that's happening. So, Jay, were you going to say something?
Nope.
All right.
Addicted to ROI.com.
Perfecto. Enrique.
Check out our website at jevonsproperties.com. You can also email me, Enrique@jevonsproperties.com.
Jay Scott, what are the 6 ways people get a hold of you?
I made it easy now. I finally made it easy. Connect with jayscott.com will lead you anywhere you want to go.
Look at that. I like that.
Just the letter J, not J-A-Y. Just the
J-A-Y. Got it.
No.
Oh, Jay. Sorry. Jay. And of course, I'm Tarl Yarber. You can follow me on Instagram at Tarl Yarber. and then our company, Fixated Real Estate, on YouTube. This is where some of these replays are actually held, and we have future stuff coming on our website too. And of course, check out Bigger Pockets. Check out all the great stuff they have, and continue following them as much as possible. Thanks for being with us, and we will see everybody else next week.